Yo, what's going on guys, Kimo here, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we'll discuss the branded Azamina deck list that I've been working on in the recent weeks. Been testing it out quite a lot online, but since I've been very busy with work stuff and a little bit sick, I've not had the opportunity to go locals in the last few weeks, so I haven't tested it in person, but at least in the simulators it's been doing very good for me. So the reason for building this deck variant is that, of course, the Azamina cards synergize somewhat well with branded as they're a fusion archetype, so you can just stuff them in without hurting your branded engine. But of course, this lowers the chance to see your branded cards, which in branded generally is a bad idea because you want to have a lot of engine to play through interruptions on your first turn and to play into boards, because branded has a pretty strong engine to play into boards as well. But if you're a branded enthusiast and you've been paying attention to the development of the meta, you might have noticed that branded has been falling out of the meta quite substantially. If you look at YCS tops, World Cup qualifier, regionals, etc., branded has not gathered quite a lot of results. There's basically just one branded list that has topped an event, and that was some weird Kashtira branded synchro variant that somehow I think topped an event. I don't think it won it as well. But the pure branded deck as we know it has not really gathered any substantial results since Rage of the Abyss, and there's some reasons for that. The big one is being, of course, Dominus Impulse. The top meta decks right now being Fire King Snake Eye Pure, and Tempai Dragon can all play Dominus Impulse, and this completely cooks branded. Because usually you have one big card that interrupts you, and that is Ash on the Branded Fusion. And if you play the Thrust package, you can, if you hard draw Thrust of course, activate your Thrust, set your Fusion duplication, and then just play on the opponent's turn. But you can't do this with Dominus Impulse, simply because it's not a monster effect. So if they just impulse you, maybe they imperm you before, you basically end on nothing. And that is a huge struggle. Of course, there's other ways to play around this. For example, you could go crazy and play a cross-out package, which I've never been a big fan of, or you could play Nadir's Servant again, which is a good choice, especially with the Mulchami cards in the meta right now, especially for Valos. It's obviously a struggle for brand as well. You want to summon your Albion, summon your Lubellion, you want to summon your Mirror Jade, your Rengignal, so you would give them theoretically a lot of draws, but you can just as well, you have the right cards in hand, just go into a Sanctifier, maybe give them 1 to 2 draws, and then Puppet Lock on their turn to stop them from playing, which would work perfectly fine. Then you still win the game. As soon as you Puppet Lock them with somewhat of a decent follow-up, you win the game, right? Against most competent meta decks. And simply because of Impulse, branded has fallen out of the meta quite a lot. There's another deck that is quite high on people's radar right now, and that is Centurion, which can play Impulse, but they play a shit ton of hand traps, and they play Bestials, and this combination just doesn't mix well with branded. Maybe you can play through their interruptions somewhat well, but they play like 15-20 hand traps. I think 18 to 20 is actually the usual amount, and you get impermed, you get veilered, and maybe you even get ashed, and then you still somehow end on a Puppet Lock because you have a goaded hand, and then you get Bestialed, and you can't play through all of it. You can play through some of it if you have a decent hand, but you can't play through all of it. And the theory behind this deck is that we want to play a deck that can bait the Impulse or set up an Omni Negate before we go into the branded engine, and then cook them that way. Going first, we don't even always need the Puppet Lock, simply because we're playing a lower engine count in the branded cards. It's a little bit harder to sometimes set it up, but we can instead end on 4 Omni Negates, and I'll show you how we achieve that in just a second. So let's start with the main deck. It's 46 cards right now, which I'm not perfectly happy with. As I said, we play a lower branded engine count. And the reason for that is that we want to see the Azamina engine. So we want to see the Poster, the Witch, and then get to the Simple Spoils Deception. If we up the engine count of branded, or the non-engine count, both of that, which I would like, you of course lower your chances to seeing those cards. which I don't particularly like, but I'll explain my thoughts along the way. The main deck, as I said, consists of 46 cards, which is the branded engine, the Simple Sports Azamina engine, and the non-engine. And I'll go through all of it in just a second. So for the branded engine, I think there are some ratios that we can't really adjust. For example, we still play 3 Fallen of Albas, 2 Quem, 2 Cartasia, and 3 Aluba. You could theoretically justify cutting down to 2 Aluba if you play lower deck count, even cutting down the Quem to just 1 to reduce the amount of normal summons in your deck, which is fine, it's fair, because you want to see your power spells more often. You don't want to get, you don't want to brick on normal summons, but at the same time, this is your best 1-card starter, obviously. You want this a lot of times if you can't access this, or maybe you want to play it through both, in somewhat of a grind game. You usually need 2 because your opponent mostly outs 1, and then you play the second one, especially if you get hand trapped a lot, but you can still play on their turn, go into Mirror Jade, interrupt them, whatnot, right? Then we play the 2 Shrouded Dragon. I cut this down from 3 to 1 because we're playing a low high spirits count, which you could change with this deck. It makes a lot of sense, but I'll get into that in a second as well. The next card is the One Spring and Skid. You want this for a grind game. And the last typical Albas card is the Tri-Brigade Mercurial. We're playing for the Bestials, 1 Lubellion and 1 Saronir. Also cut this down. I like this at 2 or 3, and I might even bump this up because this interacts really nicely with the Witch, but I'll explain that in a second as well. Then we of course have the Gimmick Puppet and 4 spells in the branded package, the branded fusion, branded in red, 3 branded opening, 3 fusion deployment because Cartasia is still the most important monster on the board for the most part. You have got the branded Lost, High Spirits, and I'll count it as a branded card, Foolish Burial, branded Retribution, and a card that I haven't played in a long time, that is branded Banishment. Before, this was in the side deck for mirror matches, but now I think this is really important to set up a crazy board turn 1, and I'll explain that as well, because this brings you Light and Darkness Dragon Lord, and you want those Omni Negates as well. Especially if you can't Puppet Lock. Then we're playing for the non-engine, 3 Thrust, 1 Talons, Fusion Dupe. I'm playing 3 Droplet, and 1 Cold Pipe. These are basically the standard branded ratios. Of course, normally you would cut this and play more copies of this, and the High Spirits we just played 1. But these, I think, except for the Banishment, are the minimal branded requirements you need to play. Of course, the non-engine, you could change out Droplets for other board breakers, but I think Droplet, especially in a Snake Eye format, is very important. If your Mirror Jade gets stuck in the Spell Trap zone, you want to have Droplet to get rid of it, to be able to summon out a new one, because even if you have it in the Spell Trap zone, you can't summon a second one. So that's really important in my opinion. The Azamina package is, of course, a quite small package, because it really just consists of 4 different cards that you play in the main deck. That is, in our case, 2 Witch, 3 Poster, 1 Deception, and 1 Hollowed Azamina. The reason for these ratios is that we usually don't want this as our starter. We want the Poster or the Witch, because the Witch is the monster you want to send for the Deception. We usually need our other branded monsters to go through our combos. Of course, if you have an Aliber, you can send it, but you want to go through this engine first if possible. In the draw phase, you'll activate the Poster, add a Witch. First action is you special summon the Witch, add this, activate its effect, send the Witch, get the Hollowed Azamina, activate this, and you get through the Omni Negate, and then you go into your branded engine. Of course, you don't want to send your branded monsters then for the Deception. If you have a Saronir in hand, it's not too bad. Same goes for Shrouded Dragon, but sometimes you want to draw as well. That's the reason for playing these ratios. Ideally, you want to go through the Poster, because you can even activate the Poster's effect in the graveyard later. Shuffle this back, draw one, or put it on the deck, draw one, which is also really good because if you go through your Lebellion again, you have another discard and you only have 5 cards to start with, right? If you go second, of course, you have more, but then you might need to burn more resources on playing through their board, or into their board rather. I said before, I'm not very happy with playing the High Spirits package as we do right now, because there is a very nice interaction with the Witch and the Saronia. If you send Saronia for the Witch, you can instantly get your Branded Retribution in the graveyard, which makes accessing your Branded Fusion super easy. It's a very nice interaction, so I might consider bumping this up to 2 or even 3, but I think right now, at least for my locals, Bestials aren't very good. The same, I would then bump up Shrouded to 3 as well, and play 2 to 3 High Spirits. But this comes with the issue I talked about in the beginning as well. You bump up your main deck count, you see the Sinful Spoils cards less often, you want to see the Poster or the Witch. The more you up your main deck count, the harder it is to actually draw into these cards to start your turn with. So these are the ratios I've ended up on right now, 46 cards. We play some non-engine with the Droplet and the Thrust package into Talents if you want to break a board and you lose the dice. Well, of course, if you go second, you side them some more cards, but that is the issue as well with the lower deck count. It is harder to side out cards, right? If you have a high deck count, it's very easy to pick, okay, you can cut a normal summon, maybe you cut a Shrouded Dragon, you reduce the High Spirits count because it's not as good going second. And this is of course harder if the main deck count is lower, but since we need to see these cards to push through interruptions on our turn 1, I think it makes sense. For the extra deck, we run some standard branded stuff to start with. That is 2 Mirror Jade, 1 Lebellion, 2 Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 Albion the Sanctifier, Tentaclad, and Windrum. These I think are your minimal branded requirements. You could of course discuss maybe cutting down on 1 Mirror Jade because you have the Omni Negate, you need some more extra deck space. But these are really the tough decisions you have to make when building a fusion pile, where you need to somehow reduce the branded engine and include some other cards that can help your deck out. We're still on the 2 Green Grignol. There's 2 reasons for this. First of all, sometimes you need this for the secured puppet lock. You go through 2 Green Grignols. But this also interacts really nicely with your Azamina cards, because sometimes you might get interrupted, but you can summon a Green Grignol, send one of the Azamina cards. For example, if your Hollowed Azamina got impulsed, you can send one of the Azamina cards from the extra deck at the Hollowed Azamina back to your hand by shuffling the Azamina card back into your extra deck, and then activate it again if you have another wanted or Sinful Spoils card rather to send for its effect. So this comes in handy in both regards, and in testing this has come up for me. We're playing the Light and Darkness Dragonlord. If you have Branded Banishment, you keep the Lebellion on board. You usually have the Albion in graveyard. This plus Lebellion brings you the Light and Darkness Dragonlord. So you basically can play with 4 Omni Negates, which is tough to play through. If you go first, you resolve your cards, you win. But that is of course with most strong combo decks as well, but this is just how we set it up. We're still playing the Guardian Chimera. I kind of prefer it over the Chaos Dragon right now, since we need to include the Azamina cards. And this is a little bit more generic. Of course you need 3 cards instead of just 2, but in some weird situations it's easier to go into, and you of course get the draw still. The Bowlord Furious Dragon, such a good card in branded. I think I will never cut it if I have the ability to keep it in. And then for the Azamina cards, we're playing the Ilia Sylvia, the Omni Negate, and we're playing the Soul. I'm not trying to pronounce it. The Soul Board Breaker card, because this is very good for going second. You don't want the Omni Negate because either you don't even get to this card, or it doesn't help you a lot, and you would rather want to summon out this. It's somewhat big, 2700, and it lets you get rid of 1 card on their board. that is it for the extra deck. Alright, what I'll show you here is our basic bread and butter combo if we have access to our Brand Infusion and to our Azamina engine. We'll have some random discards here. These cards don't matter, I just chose Droplet because they're already in the deck. What we'll do here in our draw phase, activate the poster to add our copy of Diabelsa the Black Witch. And then in the main phase, proceed to special summon the Diabelsa by sending one of our random discards. This will set us a copy of Deception of the Sinful Spoils, which we will then activate and then use its effect, sending the Diabelsa. Here you see why it's important to go through the Wanted engine first to add a copy of Hallowed Azamina. Then we'll activate our copy of Hallowed Azamina, revealing the Ilia Silver from the extra deck, and then sending our Deception to special summon out our Omni-Negate. And by this point, we have checked for at least one hand trap, because our opponent can interact with the poster, the Witch, the Deception, and the Hallowed Azamina. For example, this can get Impulse, the other ones can get, for example, Deception, Ogre, or Ashed. This can get Imperm Veiled, Ashed, and Ghost Monarch, just as well as this one can get Ashed, for example. So either we already ate a hand trap and are have an easier time playing with our Branded engine, or we're already good, this goes through, we know we can play. We then normal summon our copy of Aluba to add our copy of Brand Infusion. We can activate the Brand Infusion, sending Albus and Lubellion to special summon our copy of Albion the Branded Dragon. Then use its effect, banishing the Albus and the Diabelsa to special summon out a copy of Lubellion. Activate Lubellion's effect, discarding another card, shuffling back the Albus and the Lubellion to summon out our copy of Mirror Jade. What we do next is special summoning our Lubellion from graveyard by tributing the Albion, and then using its effect to place our copy of Branded Lost. Here, we can already proceed to the end phase. Of course, you can play this to get into a puppet lock, but I think 4 Omni-Negates will do just fine. So in the end phase, we use the effect of Albion to set our copy of Branded Banishment. And then on the opponent's turn, we'll use the Omni-Negator at whatever point with the Ilia Silver, and then chain the Branded Banishment, targeting our Albion and graveyard, special summoning it back, and then using itself and the Lubellion to summon out a copy of the Light and Darkness Dragonlord. Of course, if you want to protect this, you just don't chain it, but activate it on a new chain. We then have 3 more Omni-Negates, so 4 in total with the Ilia Silver, and our Lost will trigger, which won't get negated by Light and Darkness Dragonlord. We get a search for either Mercurier, for example, or Cartesia, or Spring Kids, whatever you want as follow. And this way you have 4 Omni-Negates, Mirror Jade, and potentially a Droplet, Book of Eclipse, whatever you have in your deck as an engine. And this way, you should win most games. The setup we end up on, of course, can change heavily depending on the cards we draw into. For example, you can set up a puppet lock very easily and then have it protected with the Ilia Silver as well to play through, for example, a Caught by the Grave on the opponent's turn to make sure your puppet lock goes through. The Omni-Negate just gives an additional layer of protection for that. And this way, you either set up 4 Omni-Negates or an Omni-Negate that protects the puppet lock. If your plays go through, it's way easier to win the duel that way. As I said, the Azamina engine acts in 2 ways. First of all, ideally it protects your plays, but as well it can bait some interruptions from the opponent's side. They don't want to want you to have this engine resolved, because either you get an Omni-Negate, or game 1, if they don't know what you're playing, they want to stop you from accessing the Snake Eye engine. Because normally you would go into the Mu Arceolago first, and add, for example, your OSS, and then go into the Snake Eye engine that way. And yeah, this way you can bait some negates, protect your place, and this deck then has a little bit of a higher ceiling. But of course, as well, you have a little bit low Branded engine count, which I'm not sure if I'll like it in the end over the regular Branded deck, but this is what I'm trying out currently. As I said, there's a lot of cards that you can discuss that you want to play or maybe not play. As I said, I would like to increase our count of Bestials in the form of Saronir, maybe Shadow Dragon with Branded High Spirits, because I think they interact really well with the Witch, because they're a nice discard for it. What I decided to cut right now, not because of how the deck functions, but simply because of the meta right now, is the Allure package. I normally love this because Allure is a crazy good card, but there's a lot of draw right now, which is a little bit scary, because that's the budget way of outing the Mulch armies, and at the same time it just hits a lot of decks really good. For example, against Fire King, it's a very nice card. Against pretty much most rogue decks, draw is really good as well. So playing Allure is a little bit more scary right now, and at the same time you don't want to brick on these cards. Tragedy, of course, it's nice to recycle your Branded Fusion. Sometimes it's actually also good to access your Branded Fusion if you don't use its effect on the first turn to search a Despia, but at the same time it doesn't come up that much. And if we go into our engine, if we can play, we win, then the Tragedy just hinders us by not drawing into it. Since I cut this down, I'm also not playing the Goldstock, but just the Foolish. And on the extra deck, we had to make some tough choices as well. For example, I love Queritis or even Lulu with Lilith as a additional target for Grangignol, other than just Clem. Abelanade is obviously very good into the Tempai matchup, but also very, very good going second against Centurion. They set up the Blazer Dragon, you just set an Albus, fuse away their board with the Blazer, and you're good. Basically, that way you interact with that board really nicely. Then one of our plays under Shifter is the Dracostapelia, but we can do the same thing with the Light and Darkness Dragon Lord. I think even better. I think it's a better end board piece than the Dracostapelia. They can target dodge the Dracostapelia because it targets a card that puts the counter on it. And at the same time, the Light and Darkness Dragon Lord offers 3 Omni Negates that they can chain block, but you need Cartesia access, not just Branded Fusion access, to go into the Light and Darkness Dragon Lord. So maybe Dracostapelia is nice. And as I've said, I've cut the Chaos Dragon, which I think is super cool. In the pure variant, I would play it right now. So I would pick these two over the Azamina cards, but yeah, I've cut them right now. The side deck is the last thing to talk about for this deck profile. And with this, I can just repeat myself as in any other deck profile video where I talk about the side deck. And it is that this side deck should always depend on your locals meta. Of course, if you go to a high level event like YCS, Nationals, potentially even Regionals, you can make some meta calls. For example, right now you should prepare for Snake Eyes Fire King. You should prepare for Tempai, maybe Centurion. And these are like the top meta decks right now that you should be prepared for. But most people just go to their local level, and even at a regional, you won't just see the top meta decks. You will see them at the top tables, but not every single round. And for this, you just need to be aware, what are the decks that are played at my locals right now, and which decks in the current meta or at my current locals meta do I struggle against. So you want to prepare for these decks. Here I just have an example. One of the cards that you should probably always include in your branded side deck is the Masquerade, simply because it's our in-engine option for time. If you play the Frightful package, this is even easier to access, but Cartesia can still fuse your Alibur and level Light and Dark or your Cran into a Masquerade to make sure your opponent needs to pay life points to interact with your plays. Even going second, you can do this. If you want to set up a board that can push for some damage, for example, the Mirror Jade, the battle phase, you summon out this. If they want to interact with you first, they need to burn themselves for damage and you can win the game that way. We're on a cut that I might potentially cut, but I just love it too much, so I included it for now, and that is the Book of Eclipse. It's a cool board breaker. It baits an Ash, which is really good for branded as well, because they would draw in the end phase, they can Ash it, it's really good. It's very good against the synchro based decks that synchro summon on your turn as well, for example Centurion or White Forest. So you just flip the board if they want to use an effect to synchro, and you can do that. A card that is really good right now in the meta, I think, for multiple decks is Cosmic Cyclone. We play it at 2 here. This is very good against the Viking Island, of course, as a board breaker. It's also very good against Centurion to kill their field spell. It's good against Tempai to kill their field spell, and so on. So it's a very good card. It's quite versatile. Of course, if you end up getting paired against a stun deck, against Runics, this is good against the Fountain as well. So there's a lot of versatile use cases for Cosmic Cyclone right now, or potentially even play it at 3. Also for back row hate, and we have a big thrust package on the side right now, is the Harpy's Feather Duster. Just for the memes, one change of heart. I think it's a cool card. One other card that you could play at a higher count, which I think is a very decent board breaker, and that is Rule No More. We then play 3 evenly matched, which I think is potentially one of the highest impact board breakers, and with Branded you can easily pull it off if it goes through, simply because you can just pop a lock afterwards. It doesn't matter that you skip your battle phase, you just kill him on the crackback. Then we play 1 Destructive Rumor Cannon, because I'm still scared of towers. In the thrust package, 1 V-Barrier for Tempai. And also for Tempai, but against many other decks as well, a Tikaboo, because you can play very good in Branded. Your end board surprisingly doesn't have a lot of dragons, right? This card really cooks a lot of decks still, and is a floodgate that you can play in Branded currently. Of course, you can't search it, you can't directly access it, but because we have a lower deck count, at least we have a little bit higher chance to draw into it. A good extra deck thought right now as well is for going first, not even Book of Eclipse, but actually Ash to play through the Mochamis, because you can just Ash them. It's a very smart choice as well. Same goes with Droll. Maybe you finished your searching, you just roll them on their draw from the Mochamis, so you don't give them infinite draws and then play out your combo. Those are potential ideas. So yeah, that's it for the video. Thank you for watching. I would love to hear some feedback on the deck list. If you maybe would switch something around with the ratios, or maybe include some other cards that I didn't include, let me know about that, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.